Good morning, James, and welcome, fellow Unlearners. We're we're back again to keep dismantling stuff and ruining the contemporary understanding of religion and Christianity, and bring us to a better, truer, closer understanding of who God is and who we are. So, James, you had something you were about to run with, please.
Yeah, I was just reading through the notes that I keep. It's a note from a scripture in First Chronicles, and then comparing it with the scripture out of the New Testament. And what I what I just got to thinking about is that we have such low expectations
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
ourselves and of God, especially.
Hmm.
I mean, well, I don't care what it is; it's low expectations.
Yeah.
Here we are, born out of God, born to be like God. That because He's a father, and fathers want their children to be like them instead of the world. But at any rate, let me just read this note. He suffered no man to do them wrong. Yea, he reproved kings for their sakes, saying, touch not mine anointed and do my prophets no harm. But then when we jump over to Hebrews 11:39 and 40, we
Hmm.
hear, and all these talking about the people that have come before Paul, that and Jesus, and all the things they suffered because of their faith.
Hmm.
And he goes on and goes, all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. And I began to think about that years ago. Here, God did these wonderful things. He reproved kings for their sake. He said, don't touch my anointed. He
Hmm.
protected his people, he kept them safe back then. And then I believe Paul wrote Hebrews, regardless of who wrote it.
Yeah.
It says, and God having provided something better for us. So, all the wonderful things that God did for the children of Israel, those were just a few of the things. God provided something better for us, that they would not be made perfect or complete apart from us.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, so God could have done something. I'm not sure what, but he could have done something to cement something good in them,
Hmm.
but he didn't. He waited until we came along, and it's because of Christ.
Hmm.
Whatever he was doing, whatever Christ was going to do, was going to affect not only those that came after Christ, but was going to go in reverse and affect all of those that had come before Christ.
Yeah.
Okay?
Hmm.
And so I got to thinking about, wow, God did all these wonderful things. I mean, their clothes didn't wear out in the wilderness. They had food. They had, whether they liked it always or not, they were taken care of. They were provided. They were protected. And it
Yeah.
was wonderful what he did for them.
Hmm.
And now you look at the way we're living, and all we have, according to the modern theology, is that God has done something really good that we're going to one day know. We're going to
Right.
one day see and feel.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
can't be.
Right.
That God could do it now because he did it in the now for them back then. And so he could do it in the now for us. But no, we've got to wait, which I guess means that all those that came before us have got to wait for it too, whatever it is. I'm trying to follow the modern theological mindset.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
And so
Yeah. The Old Testament God did amazing stuff, and the New Testament God doesn't, kind of.
doesn't. No,
Yeah.
no. One day he's done it, but it's all spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
since we
Right.
don't know what spiritual is, and and okay, it's spiritual, but how does that affect me right now?
Hmm.
Because in the Old Testament, it affected them right now,
Right.
right? Whatever. And
Yeah.
so I'm just looking at that, and I'm reasoning through that, and saying, "Oh man, how do we get this way?" And then I got to thinking. I I went to Habakkuk. There's a couple of verses in Habakkuk that are just marvelous.
Okay.
But I came across this one in verse 113. There's something I used to hear in that campus organization, and I've heard it preached by so many people and said by so many people, that
Mhm.
God cannot look on evil.
Yeah.
He cannot look on bad. It says, "You are of purer eyes than to behold evil, and cannot look on wickedness." I've heard it preached that God cannot look on evil and wickedness, and if you're evil and wickedness, He can't look on you. So you got to straighten out your life so that
Mhm.
God can look at you. But what's interesting, those people that preach that, if you continue reading the verse, it says, "You cannot look on wickedness. So why do you look on wickedness?"
Mhm.
He actually says, "Why do you look on those who deal treacherously, and hold your tongue when the wicked devours a person more righteous than he?"
Mhm.
Well, that would completely destroy the theology of those people who preach that God can't look on wickedness.
Mhm.
There's something else going on here, because God can look on wickedness. He's looked on wickedness, and he looks on it now.
Mhm.
And it doesn't affect him like it does us.
Yeah.
Bottom line, because of the fact that God does not believe the lie. He knows the lie, which we've talked about, and we're going to talk about it many times over the years, because it's so fundamental to understanding this whole thing that's going on.
Mhm.
But God, he doesn't believe the lie, but every one of us has been soaked in the lie. And God's goal is to teach us. We've got a God who's utterly wonderful, and we have been twisted up in our own thinking. And this is not just this generation, this goes back to the beginning in the garden. Okay. We've got this perspective of God and of all of life and of his words and everything, but it's all seen through the filter of the lie.
Mhm.
God knows we believe the lie. He knows exactly what the lie and the lies are,
Mhm.
but he knows they're not true.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about a lie is some sort of information that isn't true. If you think about it, and this would help some people because it helps me a lot, that when I realize something is going on, or that I've seen or I've learned something that's not true, that means that it doesn't exist except in my mind and in other people's minds,
Mhm.
because it's not true. It's not real.
Right.
It's just we think it's real, so we live like it's real. All along, we're living a lie. We're living false information, because whatever the lie is, it doesn't exist. There is no knowledge. There is no substance. There's nothing you can knock on to say it exists, because it doesn't exist. That lie, God doesn't believe it, and He knows it's not true.
Mhm.
And what He wants to do is teach us and instruct us to unlearn all the misinformation that we've learned, that
Mhm.
we're sure is true, that we
Mhm.
would never question. And
Yeah.
God says, no, we're going to question it. And we don't like what we believe to be questioned. Nobody does.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that, and when what you believe that you've based your life on turns out to not be true, or to call into question, that affects your identity, your own personal identity of yourself, who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, but it does. But
Yeah, that's a
anyway,
good yeah. Who am I without this lie?
yeah, who
Right? Like,
wow.
I struggled with that when God told me everything I believed was wrong. I was like, "Okay, well, then what do I put in there?" And he told me the truth, he said, "I'll give you the truth." And I was like, "Great," but it was the beginning of a journey of, letting go on some stuff. Some stuff disappeared right away, like we've talked about, and then some stuff continues to hang on. Like, I don't seem to be able to let go of some things and embrace the true thing. And some stuff I did work through. God walked me through. some of that. Some
Our emotions are key to all of this,
Yeah.
because our emotions tell us what's true,
Yeah.
even if it's not.
Yeah.
And our emotions are the most real things that we experience.
Yeah.
So if our emotions tell us that wrong is right, and
Mhm.
maybe even what we're looking at, we're saying, well, no, wrong can't be right, but our emotions are saying that wrong is right,
Yes. Oh,
it can be tough.
it is. It is. I've had a number of those. A really big one was I was going over something that I knew wasn't in the truth of God, but felt very true.
Hmm.
And I was just asking him kind of to get rid of it. And he said, what he said to me was, what if I did? What if I already did? And you just don't know it. And I was like, oh my gosh, then I'm just making it up, you know? And
Yeah.
Melissa had the same thing happen where she was wrestling with being a bad mom and tell asking God, how do I not feel like a bad mom? And he was like, I can't tell you how to fix something that isn't there. You
Wow.
know? Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so that's definitely a sticking point for me is trying to get God to fix something that's not there. And you can definitely get trapped in that.
Yeah. How do you deal with what God says isn't when you
Right.
know it is?
Right.
Or how do
Right.
you deal with what is when you know it isn't? It goes back to things like where he says, by his stripes you were healed. Well, according to God, we're healed.
Yes.
But my body doesn't agree with that.
Yeah, I got a shoulder thing going right now that I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I'm healed. That's not healed, but I am healed. So what the heck?"
Well,
Yeah.
that takes me back to a scripture where Paul said that we walk by faith,
Mhm.
not by sight.
Yeah.
So
That's
we
right.
first we got to define some of the words, because the words are not defined, and most people really have no idea what the words mean. I mean, it's a pretty
Yeah.
verse, it's wonderful,
Yeah.
but they don't know what the words mean. They
Yeah.
think they do. The word walk is a participle, and it is actually a compound word, but it means that we walk around. It's not that we walk by faith, we walk around. So it's talking about a
Okay.
continual walking around. Every place that we go, I'm walking around in life. So we walk around by faith. Well,
Yeah.
faith is very simply treating God's words as fact. That's faith. I
Yeah.
God's word is fact. I
Mhm.
agree with that. Faith has nothing to do with feelings. It's just
It
so.
often has it goes against feelings.
Yes, it goes against
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
So I walk around by believing God's truth. And if you're treasuring what God says, you're treating it as fact, and you're treating it as fact that you're not going to let anything get between you and it.
Yeah.
That's faith. And actually, it has nothing to do with actions either. Okay, I was involved with the faith movement down in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a little while. They used to say that faith was acting on the word of God. Faith is agreeing that what God says is reality, it is truth, regardless of what physical senses tell me, what flesh tells me, what other people tell me, what my mind tells me, what
Mhm.
my feelings tell me.
Mhm.
It says no, those are not reality. Reality is what God says. I
Yeah.
may have to deal with circumstances that are contrary to what God says,
Yeah.
but that's fine. Deal with them the best you can. God will give you wisdom,
Mhm.
but in the meantime, you're believing and you're treasuring that regardless of what I'm suffering or what I'm experiencing, what God says is true and real, and I'm going to keep agreeing no matter what my body tells me.
Yeah.
So my body says I'm sick, okay, then my body says it's sick, but I'm agreeing with God.
Mhm.
That is major. I wanted to get to Habakkuk 1:5. Look among the nations and watch. Be utterly astounded, for I will work a work in your days which you would not believe, though it were told you. What God is telling us is that he was in the process of doing something that was so utterly fantastic, so utterly off the charts, that even if he told them what he was doing and what was going to happen, they could not conceive. It would be a complete wipeout.
Hmm.
It's just impossible. It's impossible. And I even look today in the modern church and how they talk about salvation, what salvation is, and what happened with Jesus when he went to the cross and rose from the dead. And I look at and listen to what they say, and it's like you don't have a clue. You don't have a clue. You've been taught this. The same thing's been taught for centuries,
Hmm.
and it's not true. What God was doing was so utterly fantastic that He tells them back then, I can't even tell you. I can't tell
Right.
you because you're not going to get it, but
Hmm.
you will get it. And it is possible for us to see things now that literally we actually are seeing things, but we don't recognize what we're seeing. We don't understand what we're seeing. And so we either misinterpret it or we ignore what
Hmm.
God is showing us and telling us. And um, I just find this an exciting verse for me that God has said, I can't show you, talking to the Jews back in Habakkuk's time,
Yeah.
but what he's done is so utterly wonderful. And today we still don't know what God did. We still don't. Now, I shouldn't say we because I do. I do understand it. And what I see is so much more wonderful and glorious than anything I've ever heard preached. I've never heard anybody preach the things that I've seen. And I don't know why people haven't seen it, but I'm determined to let people see these things because it will turn them upside down and it will answer volumes of questions and
Yeah.
concerns they've always had, um, that the answers are right here in front of us.
Hmm.
All the answers we want are right in front of us. We're looking at them so often, but
Hmm.
because of the way we've been twisted up in our minds due to believing the lie and all the weird teachings that we've received that
Hmm.
we are sure are true, we're
Yeah.
sure all this stuff we've learned is right. I
Right.
mean, it has to be because my dad believed it, my grandfather believed it, my pastor
Yeah.
and preacher teach it,
Yeah.
and it's like, I just believe God is so much more wonderful and so much. So he's a father, he's a daddy, and he's a daddy
Mhm.
that can do anything, that can
Mhm.
do anything he wants to do.
You know what I was just thinking was that what you're saying, how it's so wonderful, and yet we look around and it's not so wonderful in a lot of ways in the world.
Yep, agreed.
And I was just thinking of how people who don't know God or believe him or whatever, atheists and stuff like that, would say that we're delusional. And it's so interesting that what they would consider to be fact is actually the lie. It just popped into my head because it's a very, you talked about faith, it's a very odd thing to think, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Yet my body, I've got aches and pains. A good, my best friend's father died this morning. And and believer, Christian guy, and you're just like, to lose somebody, and yet we still do look at the world, me and you and others, I'm sure,
Yeah,
hopefully more and more people as we talk, but we look at the world and see that God's good and has these wonderful things in spite of some of that stuff. And I think people would, atheists or whoever would look and say, you're crazy, it's bad, it's a mess.
yeah,
And they're
yeah, yeah.
clinging to all of the bad truth that they're seeing,
How
which
can
is,
how can all this terrible stuff not be true? How can
yeah,
it
right,
not be real? Because it's real. I mean,
yeah,
don't tell me it's not real. You're delusional, like you
right,
say.
yes,
But
yeah,
But I go back to that story I've told you years ago of Telluride,
Yeah.
and looking for something and finally realizing that the reason I couldn't see what was right in front of me was because of my expectations.
Expectations,
Yes, and
exactly.
I had never considered anything like that before. And
Yeah.
then as I chased that down for years now, it's
Yeah.
like expectations are everything. They
Yeah.
determine what I'm going to see, what I'm not going to see, what I'm going to feel, not
Oh,
feel,
yeah.
what I'm going to experience,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I need some way to improve my expectations. But if
Yeah.
I don't know my expectations of the problem, then those are always going to be colliding with what I want. I want
Yeah.
good, but really and truly I'm expecting things that aren't good,
Yeah.
and I don't even know it. And then when you combine my expectations that are bad with his expectations that are bad, or
Yeah.
maybe the group of people whose expectations are bad, you get a compounding effect there
Yeah.
that produces realities that nobody wants. God is going to do something, not going, he's actually already done it. He was doing it in their day. Okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
And remember that God's days are now.
Yep.
Whatever
Yep.
day, it's now.
Yep.
Okay, we don't understand that about God, and mentally grasping that is a little hard.
Yeah.
So we don't even consider that. But
Right.
we have failed to see things that God is intent we're going to see, but it just takes growth. It takes learning and instruction, which is what
Right.
God's all about, because
Yeah.
He's a Father. The thing is, God is capable of doing anything. He is
Yeah.
love. He
Yeah.
is good. God, who can do anything right now and could deliver us from any problem, uh, doesn't, but will someday. And the most common answer that I hear to that, to dealing with that issue, is simply that it's free will, so we're on our own.
Okay.
God says it's free will. So if you all want to die, if you want to hurt each other, if you want to whatever, or if something bad happens, it was because you did something wrong. It's your free will, and there's
Right.
nothing I can do about it. And
Right.
I just think, frankly, that's stupid. That's
Okay.
stupid thinking, because God is who he says he is. He's not somebody else. He just plainly tells us throughout the Bible who he is. The problem is so much of the translating is so horrendous, that it contradicts. Much in the Bible contradicts that God is good, that
Mhm.
he's love, that he's kind,
Mhm.
because of all the things he's done. Think about all the nations he wiped out.
And not only the translation, but also our expectation. The translation, yes, but even if the words are the same words, what we think about who is saying them matters a great deal. So let's say if if me and my wife had an argument one night and the next morning I text her, "Hey, I love you," then she might read that as, "Oh, he's just trying to smooth me over," or something like that. But if we hadn't had an argument and we were in pretty good standing and I texted and said, "Hey, I love you," she would say, "Oh, he loves me." You know, it would be that simple of an interpretation.
Sandra and I, once in a while, will have a disagreement.
Sure.
And she'll say something that I react to badly, and I'll lash back, and
Yeah.
then a little later, my emotions have calmed down, and
Yeah.
whatever was bothering me before she even said anything,
Yeah.
all of a sudden I realized what was bothering me, and that caused me to react to her
Yeah.
wrongly,
Yeah.
because what I understood when I was feeling bad,
Yeah.
to what I understood her to say, isn't what she meant. But
Yeah.
because of the way I was feeling, I
Yeah.
misinterpreted what she was saying. Once I had calmed down, I understood what she said, and I have to apologize. I blew it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you take that to the Bible and the interpreters.
Hmm.
Not because they're not just translators, they're interpreters
They're
too.
interpreters. That's
Yeah,
right.
and
They're yeah,
they're trying to capture what was meant. And if they, Martin Luther in the, what was it, 1500s,
yeah,
finally went into the Bible for himself and read it and was like, this is not what you guys are saying at all. Like,
yeah,
this is saying something incredibly different. And what caused him to see it differently? I assume God, that
yes,
his attitude was alive in Martin Luther, and he said, holy moly, you guys are telling people to pay you and talk to you when God is the one who's inviting us to talk to him. Like, what are you doing?
yeah,
And so yeah, that for 1500 years after Christ, they were, no, you don't talk to God, you talk to us. And it says right there, we've got a high priest who sympathizes with our weaknesses and connects us directly to the Father.
yeah,
And they were going through priests and saints and Mother Mary and all these people. And he was like, hang on, we talked to God. We talked to God directly. But they didn't see that. No, you can't talk to God. He's too holy. He's too far away. You can't look on evil, which is us. So you got to put a few filters in between us
yeah,
and him, kind of dilute how crappy we are so that he can hear what we're talking about. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, it was all interpreted that way.
yeah. It's and that's based on what they have known and believed, whether
Felt,
it's true or not. Doesn't make
yeah,
any difference. They know it and believe it,
yeah,
so to them it's true. All the information they receive is going to be interpreted and understood through what they already know,
yeah,
whether what they already know is right or wrong.
yeah. And you
Probably, and
look
it's
at,
probably a combination.
right, and you only have to look as far as yourself, but you can look at two or three other people in your life and see that that is absolutely how we operate.
Yeah, all of us. Yeah,
Everybody, yeah. You ask three people an opinion on something, and you're going to get three different opinions,
yeah, yeah.
because they all see stuff different, they all feel stuff different, they all have different biases and prejudices and hurts.
Proverbs 3,
Mhm.
verses 27 and 28,
Okay.
where God is saying, now this is God's command to people through Solomon: withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do it.
Yeah.
Say not to your neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it by you. So that's what God's telling us. If you've got a need and I can help you, then don't say, come back tomorrow. And
Right.
especially if I owe you something. But he didn't have to do that.
Right.
God is telling us what we're supposed to do, but he's a father and he's telling us because this is what he does.
Yeah.
He does not withhold. Now that creates a big problem
Yeah.
because he says, don't withhold good from them to whom it is due. Well, who's it due? Well, I'll tell you what, I know good is due to me because I'm his child.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter my behavior. He wants to do good for me and to me. And he
Yeah.
does everyone else. I don't care what people say. I know what God's heart and desire is. There's something else going on that may make it look like he doesn't want to do good, but it's not God.
Right.
So when I need healing, he's not telling me to wait till I die
Yeah.
and then I'll have healing. This verse says that if I need healing, he's going to give it to me.
Yeah.
But what do I do about the fact that he's going to give it to me, which means he gave it to me?
Yeah.
Okay, because God doesn't do anything in the future. Everything about God is always right now.
Right.
And
Right.
so he's doing it, but I don't see it. I
Right.
don't feel it. In fact, I'm experiencing something totally different from what God seems to have promised.
Right.
What do I do with that?
Right.
And once again, it goes back to this subject that we're going to talk about for years, is that what I have learned and am knowing and believing is true, that determines what I expect. It's
Mhm.
impossible to not determine if I believe something is true, that is going to determine my expectations. And my expectations are going to determine what I see, what I feel, what I experience. It makes no difference about anything else. My expectations determine what I'm going to experience.
It's like we've talked about with the movie Inception. There's the scene at the end where uh his final memory of his father gets twisted by the team that goes into his dreams, from that the father is disappointed in his son for not being like him, to the father is disappointed that the son was trying to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that other line in the movie where where a character says to another, you do realize if we change this final memory of the guy's father, it's going to affect everything about him. It's going to change everything about who he is, what he's like, how he
Yeah,
behaves,
yeah, yeah.
because it's that thing that's buried down in there. And I mention it because I wanted to tie to you talking about expectations, how they can be even invisible to us practically. But it was so kind of deep in him and such a core, impactful thing that he wasn't consciously acting a certain way because of that. Not really. He was kind of subconsciously doing it.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was expecting a disappointment from his father, and so he was behaving accordingly. But when he was expecting his father wanted better for him, he started behaving accordingly to that without even doing it on purpose.
Yes, absolutely. I did want to say, anybody that's listening to this,
Hmm.
we create more questions than we answer.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry about that.
yeah, but the thing is, we can and will answer every question
Hmm.
that we raise,
Yeah.
but there's too much information here to be able to answer all the questions. I mean, I say a lot of things that I know people are not going to comprehend or they're going to wonder about. And
Yeah.
I can answer all of them. There's not anything I say that I don't have a response for, as I'm
Hmm.
sure you do too.
Hmm.
And the response will make sense, but we just can't cover it all at one time, or we're going to be always going down a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
uh, and never getting to what we want to get to, which frankly, often we never do get to what we want to because we've chased so many rabbits.
Yeah.
But they're all good. They're all interesting. And all of this is so important.
Even asking the question. I think, in psychology, asking questions is a foundational tool because you want people to think about the stuff and ask it and go to God to get the answers, and they'll look in themselves. For a while I did, for 20 plus years I looked in me. I can figure it out, I got to figure it out. And then there just came a point where I don't even know how I did it, but I guess I asked God in some fashion that I didn't know I wasn't, and he was the one who was able to provide an answer. And his answer, like we talked about the other day, his answer was something, one, that was very smart and tailored very much to me. It was a teaching from my dad to me as a son, where my dad knows who I am and what I'm like and how I respond and how I learn and how I listen. And when other people tried to tell me the same stuff, I couldn't hear it. It offended me, you know,
Yeah.
I resisted it even though I wanted it and believed them to be right. It was that spirit moving in me, God's, that was able to cause me to hear and cause me to listen and really make a difference where people telling me before hadn't made that much of a difference. So, even us posing more questions than answers is maybe the better thing, because I know people come to YouTube and they go, how to this in 10 easy steps, or, I solved something and you can too. And we want to give that, but the questions are so important too, because I used to get angry at the Bible for not answering my specific questions
Hmm.
for me personally in my life with my relationships. I wanted it to say Lee needs to do this with his wife and his kids and his boss in this situation. Like I wanted just an instructions. And it's so much better as kind of a letter to us that's just telling us, here's who God is, here's who you are, and then those other questions are answered in that, like you said at the very beginning. When we find out some of this stuff, thousands of questions get answered all at once. And it's true when you realize that he's for you, when he's not against you, when he does love you, when he does want to take care of you, then all these questions of why aren't you taking care of me? Why aren't I loved? Why aren't I feeling
You
this or
know,
seeing this? It all gets answered.
it's reminds me of Job. And
Hmm.
at the very end of Job, I mean, he's got this long story of, terrible. I mean, it's miserable.
Yeah.
And he's got question after question after question. And at the very end, God reveals himself to Job. And at that point in time, Job has no more questions.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. It was over.
That's his answer. How come this? How come this? How come this? How come this? And then God shows up.
Well, you
And
you know
he's
you were
like, hey, buddy. And Job's like, okay, never mind. I love you. You love me. Okay. Never mind.
if we just knew who God is,
Yeah.
which I've always said, there's only two questions that are of importance, and that's who is God and who are you. You
Yeah.
get those two answered, everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And
Eventually. Sometimes not right away, sometimes over time, but yes. Yeah.
yeah, well, when you find out who God is, and that's a forever process to me.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, but as we continually get to know Him, questions we had, they just disappear because you now know. You know to the point you don't even remember it was a question because you now know.
Yeah.
What I wanted to throw out, because you mentioned a few minutes ago about the Bible being a letter from
Yeah.
God, and it is. It's God's. They're epistles. They're letters.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if you find a letter on the street and you read it, you have nothing to base your understanding of that letter on except yourself, what
Right.
you know. And so if you don't know who wrote this letter, um, your determination of what it meant is based solely on yourself.
Wow. Yeah.
And the thing is that if we're going to understand God's word, you don't frankly start with trying to figure out what it means.
Right.
You A translation which you've never seen, but if you ever saw a real translation, they're hard to understand.
Yeah.
They're because the linguistics back then were different than now, and today people are translating with modern using modern linguistics to translate something that's different, had different linguistics, and
Yeah.
nobody seems to ever consider that. I know they do, but I don't know who, because I don't hear people talking about it.
Yeah.
But we've got if we've got this letter that we have found and we don't know who wrote it, we know nothing about them, then we can only base our understanding of the letter on what we already know.
Yeah.
So when we get these letters from God, the answer is not to dig in and try to see what this means and what that means and how this word and this syntax and this I mean it's just confusing. It's confusing.
Yeah.
If you ever read a lexicon, an unabridged lexicon, I know preachers that don't like to read unabridged lexicons because they've got too much information, and the information is so in depth they just refuse to read them.
Yeah.
I've had them tell me that. Um, but I love the unabridged lexicons because they tell you what a whole lot of different people and different sources thought that different things meant.
Yeah.
And you begin to see how much translating is guesswork
Yeah.
because the translators have got the lexicons and they're looking at them and they're trying to figure out which definition fits in this verse. And if none
Yeah.
of these definitions fit in this verse, oftentimes they just make up a definition. They'll make
Yeah.
up a definition that you won't find. The translator used a particular definition for a word, and you can go through every lexicon, and none of the lexicons have that definition of the word. And it's like, how do you deal with that? What I learned a long time ago, and I still do, and I have been told this is wrong and you shouldn't do it. Um, I don't care because it works for me.
Yeah.
I always talk to God about who is he? Father, I need to know who are you? Who is Jesus?
Yeah.
And who am I?
Yeah.
Because when I know those things, then when I read what you say, I will have an idea of what you meant. Because if
Yeah.
I don't know anything about you, then I can't know what you meant. And I can tell you this that it's obvious to me from all the translations that I have read that translators seldom know who God is. They know what they've been taught, they know what they've learned, they know what they've read, they know what they've studied and what they've analyzed,
Hmm.
but they don't know it because they've had an encounter with God in which God has said, here's my heart, here's who I am, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And they would say that they have that, but you can read the way they translate and you say, well, this doesn't make sense. How can you if you know God, then how can you believe that God said this or that God did that? Because if you know God, you know he couldn't have said that and he couldn't have done that. And yet that's what you're translating. He did this and he said this. And if you know who God is, you know that's impossible. He couldn't
Yeah.
have done that. So that means that we don't have an understanding of the Greek that you're reading, or you don't have an understanding of the Greek that you're reading to accurately tell us what God said. You just made it up because that's what you've heard,
Yeah.
you've learned. And it's like, um, I'm not
Can
trying to be
you?
critical of people, but we've got to know who is God? Who are
Yeah.
we? What is God up to? What does he want for us? What
Yeah.
has he already done? When you find out what salvation really is, then it turns your whole life right side up.
Yeah. You're spot on.